Resident Evil has inspired countless people throughout the years. Some were entranced by the desolate yet soothing sounds of the save room themes and took to composing music. Others found their call in the unique visuals that shaped their art styles. A few even went on to create new games that paid homage to the series. Those of us who read the weapon descriptions and ran off to see if we could find it in our dad's gun and ammo magazines, well, we were a bit spoiled. Resident Evil is chock full of real, attainable firearms that are either awesome in their own right or uniquely customized to make them timelessly iconic. And among those many, many weapons, there was always one that caught my eye, but not in the way you might expect. No, this gun had me scratching my head not because of what it was, but how it was configured. And of course, me being me, I decided to set this thing up in person to confirm my doubts. Let's take a look at my, admittedly, half-assed attempt at Jill and Carlos's M4A1 from Resident Evil 3, Nemesis. Those of you who have taken up arms as Jill Valentine and made that horrifying pilgrimage through Raccoon City will likely be familiar with the M4A1. The assault rifle, as it's called in-game, is attainable a few different ways. Carlos is automatically equipped with it during his segment of the story. However, if you want it as Jill, you're either going to have to accept being a casual or put in the legwork. That's right, if you begin the game on easy mode, Jill will start with the rifle. If you want it on hard mode though, you're gonna have to take Nemesis head on and down him during his 7th appearance to obtain the weapon. After completing the game, the Infinite M4A1 can be purchased through the Mercenaries minigame for $2,000. Let's talk about how the gun operates in-game. The assault rifle can be used in 2 separate modes. Manual mode is a 3-round burst like you might find on a standard military M4. This mode is denoted by the character shouldering the gun to aim. Auto mode, much like you would guess, is fully automatic. This is truer to the actual namesake of this gun, the M4A1. This mode is denoted by a character hip-firing the weapon like Rambo. Keep in mind that these 2 modes, burst fire and full auto, are not how the real-life rifle functions. Typically, you'd see a safe, semi-auto 3-round burst select fire option for an M4, and a safe, semi-auto, full auto variant for the M4A1. The ammo for this gun is percentage-based. You start out with 100% capacity, and each burst from manual mode drops it by 1%. Doing some quick math tells us this magazine theoretically holds 300 rounds. Not too shabby. The model and image of the rifle as we see it in the inventory screen paints a vivid picture of how it's set up. The base rifle, of course, is your standard M4 style with a 14.5-inch barrel. We see a Car 15 style lightweight buttstock on the end. These small but robust stocks were featured on Cold War era style rifles such as the XM177, a more compact variant of the M16. It's not uncommon to see these stocks, or reproductions of them, in use on modern rifles today. I think it's safe to assume this rifle has a standard mil-spec charging handle and an A2 style pistol grip. Up top we see a rear backup sight. The slant near the front and the lollipop style indicate to me that this is the Knight's Armament 300 meter folding rear sight. A classic choice for a military M4. We don't get a super clear picture of the optic, but given the era and a few notable features such as the adjustment turret and flip-up lens caps, indicate it's likely an Aimpoint Comp or Comp N variant red dot sight. It's also nearly impossible to make out a mount of any sort, but my first choice would likely be the Aimpoint QRP that was used with these older model aimpoints. The handguard appears to be an older Colt carbine style with 6 holes. To mount accessories on the bottom of the handguard, there would have to be a section of Picatinny bolted to those holes. What brand in particular would be impossible to say for sure. Attached to the rail section is very clearly a Knight's Armament broomstick style of vertical foregrip. In front of that we see a bipod of some fashion. The details aren't overly rendered, so it's hard to make out what it is specifically, but some attempts at diving into the history of bipods being used by military and law enforcement of the era almost exclusively return Harris as the go-to brand. If any of you have a better idea, please let me know. The rest of the rifle seems to be pretty standard. You have your front sight base and what appears to be an A2 birdcage style flash hider. One small difference I noticed was that the sling swivel that I often see mounted underneath the front sight has been swapped to a side swivel to accommodate the bipod and sling use. I previously mentioned that this rifle always caught my eye when playing RE3 back in the day. One of the obvious issues that I already mentioned is the conflicting select fire options, 3-round burst, and full auto. Generally, it's one or the other, not both. You could argue that the manual mode with the 3-round burst is just the character manually pulling the trigger 3 times. With the mode name, it would make sense, but it still feels weird to me. Besides that, I take issues with the choice of accessories and how they're configured. It doesn't seem very ergonomic, to say the least. Let's take a look at what I've recreated to see how true that is. Now, I'd like to preface this by saying that this is nowhere near clone correct. It's not an M4A1, it's not even a Colt, but I have the majority of things set up how they are in game. I have the reproduction Car 15 stock bringing up the rear. Of course, there is the Knight's Armament rear sight. I cheated on the optic just a bit. This is actually an Aimpoint Pro and not a comp, but they are near identical looking. The optic sits in a QRP mount. Note the hilariously long knob. For the handguard, I opted for the skinny version. This slim carbine handguard is ribbed for your pleasure and carries the problem children for this particular setup, the bipod and vertical foregrip. For starters, having a bipod on an M4 is just weird. It's heavy, it's bulky, and kind of defeats the purpose of having a lightweight maneuverable rifle for close engagements. Most people aren't going to stop mid-combat to deploy a bipod, and those that are taking the kind of shots that require one probably aren't using an M4. That's not to say it has never happened in the history of the world, because I'm certain it has. But it's still an odd choice, especially when the Knight's broomstick is thrown in. There just isn't enough rail to comfortably mount both accessories. With the grip all the way to the rear and the bipod all the way forward, there's no clearance to hold it without your hand contacting the bipod. I ended up moving the bipod forward one notch to where it's not in full contact with the rail. Not an optimal solution. Mounting the rail and bipod wasn't a walk in the park either. The pick rail section I purchased needed modification to work with the handguard. This older Harris bipod didn't fit snugly at all in the rail section and would wobble freely when I moved. Nothing a few layers of electrical tape couldn't fix though. Even with all the adjustments, this still isn't a configuration I would recommend. Anyone seriously using the rifle, let's say in a citywide zombie outbreak perhaps, is going to scrape the shit out of their knuckles. And the front-heavy unwieldiness of the gun will not be enjoyable to carry or shoot with. Choose one or the other, and if you must have both, use a grip pod or something. Wow, I never thought I'd say those words. Now, while I wouldn't recommend this setup, especially for special forces or law enforcement members, that doesn't mean that I still don't find it interesting and right at home in the Resident Evil universe. We're talking about a game franchise that gives Desert Eagles to cops and Calico pistols and .22 long rifle to security guards, so clearly, anything goes. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching. I make these types of videos for fun, but knowing that I have people to share that with really helps my motivation. If you have any questions or comments for me, please leave them down below and I will do my best to answer. Until next time.